The young princess, Adeline, had lost her mother, the queen, under strange and unexplained circumstances. The death of her mother was shrouded in mystery, and even the most experienced physicians could not explain it. Her father, the king, had died years before, leaving her mother to rule alone. Now, with her mother gone, Adeline was next in line for the throne. She was excited and nervous to begin her reign, but her joy was tempered by the loss of her mother. Adeline moved into the palace, eager to begin her new life as queen. However, from the moment she arrived, she felt a strange presence within the palace walls. She heard whispers in the hallways, footsteps in the empty corridors, and saw shadowy figures flit past her vision. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, grief playing tricks on her mind. But as the days passed, the strange occurrences continued. One night, Adeline was woken from her sleep by a cold breeze. She sat up in her bed and looked around the room, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. She got up and walked towards the window, but as she did, she felt a chill run down her spine. She turned around and saw a faint, ghostly figure standing in the middle of the room. The figure was that of a woman, and Adeline recognized her immediately as her mother. The ghostly queen looked sad and forlorn, and her eyes seemed to plead with Adeline for something. Adeline tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. The ghostly queen vanished before her eyes, leaving Adeline alone and trembling in fear. From that moment on, Adeline knew that something was wrong in the palace. She began to investigate her mother's death, and soon discovered that it may not have been natural. She uncovered a plot to kill her mother, one that had been in the works for years. Adeline was horrified by what she had uncovered, and knew that her own life was in danger. As she delved deeper into the mystery, the occurrences in the palace grew worse. Adeline saw the ghostly queen more and more often, and each time she appeared, the queen seemed more and more agitated. Adeline knew that she had to solve the mystery before it was too late. One day, while searching through her mother's private chambers, Adeline found a secret passage leading to a hidden room. In the room, she found a journal written by her mother, detailing the conspiracy against her. The journal also spoke of a cursed artifact that had been stolen from the palace, and which was said to be the source of the strange occurrences in the palace. Adeline knew that she had to find the artifact and destroy it. She searched high and low, but could not find it. As the days passed, the ghostly queen grew more agitated and angry, and the occurrences in the palace grew more intense. One night, Adeline woke to find the ghostly queen standing at the foot of her bed. This time, the queen was not sad or forlorn, but angry and vengeful. Adeline could feel the queen's anger burning within her, and knew that she had to act fast. Adeline fled from the palace, but the ghostly queen followed her. As Adeline ran through the streets, the queen's ghostly voice echoed in her ears, promising revenge and destruction. Adeline knew that she had to destroy the artifact before it was too late. She returned to the palace and searched once more for the artifact. Finally, she found it hidden in a secret room. The artifact was a small, ornate box, covered in runes and symbols. Adeline knew that it was the source. The princess was now convinced that the ghostly apparition she had seen was none other than her mother, warning her of the impending danger. She decided to take the matter into her own hands and began to conduct her own investigation. The princess started by delving into the palace archives, reading through old journals and documents, trying to find any clues that could help her uncover the truth. She discovered a number of disturbing entries that hinted at foul play surrounding her mother's death. Several entries suggested that the queen was not well liked by many in the palace, and that there were those who would do anything to get rid of her. One entry, in particular, stood out to the princess. It was written by one of the queen's closest confidants, and detailed a conversation she had overheard between the queen and a group of high-ranking officials. They had been discussing a plot to remove the queen from the throne and replace her with someone more compliant. The queen had been outraged at their suggestion, but the confidant had heard one of the officials make a chilling comment, "We'll find a way to silence her, one way or another." The princess's heart raced as she read the entry. She now knew that her mother's death had not been natural, but the work of those who had conspired against her. She was filled with a mix of grief and anger, and knew that she had to act fast to protect herself from the same fate. The princess decided to seek out the help of a trusted advisor, a wise old sage who had been a close friend of her mother. She confided in him about the strange occurrences in the palace, and her suspicions that her mother's death was not natural. The sage listened carefully, then told her a story of a powerful and vengeful spirit known as the Ghostly Queen. According to the sage, the Ghostly Queen was the spirit of a queen who had been murdered by her own family members. Her soul had become twisted with rage and vengeance, and she haunted the palace in which she had once lived. The sage warned the princess that if she did not act quickly, she too could fall prey to the Ghostly Queen's wrath. The princess was terrified, but she refused to be cowed by fear. She asked the sage for advice on how to protect herself, and he told her that she needed to perform a ritual that would banish the spirit of the Ghostly Queen from the palace forever. The princess followed the sage's instructions and gathered the necessary items for the ritual. She ventured deep into the palace, to the very spot where her mother had died. There, she lit candles and chanted incantations, calling upon the spirits to banish the Ghostly Queen from the palace forever. As she performed the ritual, the princess could feel the temperature dropping, and the air around her grew thick with a sense of foreboding. Suddenly, she heard a voice, low and menacing, whispering in her ear. "You cannot banish me, little one," the voice hissed. "I am the Ghostly Queen, and I will never leave this palace. You will be the next to die, just like your mother before you." The princess was terrified, but she refused to give up. She continued with the ritual, calling upon the spirits to banish the Ghostly Queen from the palace once and for all. Suddenly, the candles flickered, and the air grew still. The princess felt a wave of relief wash over her as she realized that the ritual had worked. The Ghostly Queen had been banished from the palace, and the princess was safe once more. Over time, the princess began to rebuild the palace, filling it with light and warmth. She ruled justly, As the night wore on, the princess found herself unable to sleep, her thoughts consumed with the Ghostly Queen and the fate that had befallen her. She paced back and forth in her chambers, her heart pounding in her chest with fear and anxiety. Suddenly, she heard a faint sound, like the rustling of fabric, coming from the corner of the room. She turned, her eyes widening in terror as she saw the ghostly figure of her mother materialize before her. The Ghostly Queen was pale and ethereal, her hair a tangle of white that cascaded down her shoulders. Her eyes were empty, and her face was twisted into a silent scream of rage and pain. The princess stumbled backward, tripping over the hem of her nightgown and falling to the ground. She scrambled to her feet and ran toward the door, her heart racing as she heard the Ghostly Queen's footsteps following close behind. She burst into the hallway, her breath coming in short gasps as she sprinted toward the safety of the guards' quarters. But as she reached the end of the hall, she felt a cold, bony hand close around her ankle, pulling her back with a force that sent her tumbling to the ground. The Ghostly Queen stood over her, her eyes burning with an otherworldly fury. The princess cowered before her, trembling with fear as she awaited her fate. But then, to her surprise, the Ghostly Queen's expression softened, and she reached out a hand to help the princess to her feet. "I'm sorry," the Ghostly Queen whispered. "I didn't mean to frighten you. I just wanted to warn you. You are in grave danger here, my child." The princess stared at her mother in disbelief, unsure whether to trust the words of a ghost. But then she saw the sincerity in the Ghostly Queen's eyes, and she realized that she had no choice but to believe her. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You must leave this place," the Ghostly Queen said. "Take what you can carry and flee from the palace. There is no safety here for you, not while my killer remains at large." The princess nodded, her heart heavy with grief and fear. She knew that she had to do as her mother had commanded, even if it meant leaving behind everything she had ever known. She spent the rest of the night packing her belongings and making plans for her escape. She left the palace at dawn, traveling in secret with a small group of loyal servants who had sworn to protect her. As they journeyed through the wilderness, the princess couldn't help but feel a sense of relief mixed with sorrow. She had escaped the clutches of the Ghostly Queen, but she had also lost her home and her heritage. She knew that she would never be able to return to the palace again. Years passed, and the princess became a queen in her own right, ruling her own kingdom with wisdom and grace. But she never forgot the Ghostly Queen and the terrible fate that had befallen her. She commissioned a statue of her mother to be placed in the palace gardens so that her memory would live on for generations to come. And even though she never returned to the palace where she had grown up, the ghostly queen remained with her always, a haunting reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows of the past.